Here are some lines from a poem. Go and catch a falling star. Get with child a mandrake root. Tell me where all past years are, or who cleft the devil's foot. Those lines are by John Donne, the metaphysical poet. Now, the term metaphysical is used in a slightly different sense for the metaphysical poets. It's more about literary style than content. But in the third line that I've quoted, Donne alludes to a problem that must have been one that people were aware of at the time. And it's one of the perennial problems of philosophy, I would say. Tell me where all past years are. Or in other words, what is the reality of the past? This was one of my entry points to philosophy, and one of the early articles that I read on it was by a British philosopher called Michael Dummett, who put forward what was for then the mind-blowing idea that there are no truths about the past apart from things that we can verify. There is no understanding of what it means to make a statement about the past such that we comprehend the idea of a truth that can never be known. There are no inaccessible truths about the past. There are only questions with no answers. And Dummett called this theory anti-realism. He actually describes this in the context of a theory of meaning for natural language, which is his take on what metaphysics is ultimately about. It's about giving a theory of meaning for language, because a theory of meaning describes how our thought relates to reality, and that is one of the basic aims of metaphysics. Well, I disagreed fairly fundamentally with Dummett, or I came to disagree, and I came to realize, and this was one of the topics of my doctoral thesis, that there has to be a more direct way of talking about problems like this, like the problem of the reality of the past. It can't be just about language. It's got to be something deeper. There must be some other way of getting at it. But let me just talk about it in very simple terms, without, all the philosophical paraphernalia. Just think about some important event in your past, some moment of triumph or despair, happiness, misery, something that you consider very significant. And consider that you only remember certain elements from that event. Other people might have their memories and they can share them with you, but there are many, many details which you cannot now recall. Nobody can recall. They are not recorded anywhere. Even the most diligent research could not unearth them. And yet we believe that they are real. We believe that the past is as real as the present. If it isn't, all our thoughts and feelings about things that happened in the past come into question. I mean, the most extreme example is that's often quoted is George Orwell in 1984. You can totally change the past by rewriting it, by controlling the press, controlling all the methods of communication. You can make people believe whatever you like. There is no real past. But we feel that there is. Now, in my previous video, I talked about the world of science and the world of religion, and how philosophy tries to find some other place to be. And what I was really talking about there was the famous dilemma posed to philosophy by Hume, David Hume, which is known as Hume's fork. But a version of that also was put forward in the 20th century, known as the verification principle. And it basically states that there is no knowledge that can be gained of reality other than empirical knowledge through science, or knowledge gained through mathematical reasoning, logical reasoning, or what philosophers termed philosophical analysis. This is the most questionable part of the argument, because since Quine, the American philosopher who put into question the idea that there are analytic truths, it's become very unclear what philosophical analysis is and how it can yield any knowledge anyway, but I'm not going to go there. The point is that science and religion both have an answer to the question I posed. And the answer from science is best illustrated by something that a graduate student who I once knew said to me. He was doing physics. He went on to study at CERN, where they did the experiment that discovered, supposedly, the Higgs boson. And he said to me, the universe must have a memory. He didn't believe that things happen leaving no trace. The pebble goes in the water, the ripples spread out, the ripples die down, but there must be some permanent trace left by that event, which even though our minds could never calculate the throwing of the pebble from anything that was left behind afterwards, the universe remembers. Because the universe is all set up in a deterministic way so that every event has a cause. And every event is ultimately preserved in the total network of causes and effects, even though we could never work out what it was. It's there in reality. Well, this is a really weird thing for a physicist to say, given that he knew all about quantum mechanics. He knew that the principle of determinism has been cast into doubt, that various attempts to resuscitate it, Einstein's idea of hidden variables, etc., nothing has been established that would prove the truth of determinism. But he held it as an article of faith, because it was the only way that he could see that the past could be real, that truths about the past could be preserved. Well, obviously that's not going to stand muster. So what about religion? Well, religion, the standard view would be God knows. God saw the event that I'm talking about. God remembers. God remembers everything. Or in another version of it, the recording angel. The recording angel records everything and knows everything. Although exactly why you need two individuals for this, I don't know. But, it doesn't really matter, because okay, so God knows. Why should we believe that there is a God? I mean, it seems incredible that we would be led to believe in the necessity of a God from the question whether the past is real. But actually, Michael Dummett, who I mentioned earlier, once said on a TV interview that this is what he hoped would happen, that his theory of anti-realism would end up being a proof of God in the same way that Berkeley's idealism was a proof of God, in that all that exists is an idea in God's mind. Well, both of those responses are inadequate. So we are left with this problem. It's an example of what I would term the ultimate mystery of reality.